Today's video, I'll be showing you a Warlock Prismatic build that allows you to suspend, jolt, scorch, and weaken enemies all at once, all while being nearly impossible to kill. I'll also be showing you gameplay where I'm minus 25 below the activity power level cap and still destroying everything in sight. I'll cover the prismatic setup you'll want to run in order to get the most out of this build, as well as the exotic mods and stats to focus on. Starting with the super you're going to run on this build, and you could really go two ways, but we're going to start with Song of Flame. This is a new Warlock super that allows you to have supercharged melee, supercharged little flying grenade thing that tracks enemies and causes a lot of scorch and a lot of ignitions. So just really powerful, really high damage resistance in this super. So really great to pop if you find yourself in a pinch and you're not able to absolutely fry everyone with all of your abilities. Getting into our actual abilities here, I recommend Phoenix Dive. This is going to allow us to pop our class ability as much as possible, which we'll talk about why in a second, and allow us to have this aspect up here as often as possible. From there, jump doesn't matter. Arcane Needle is a huge part of this build because it's going to allow us to embed our target, unraveling them, which is again give us a lot of additional darkness damage and gives us 3 melee charges, which is huge. Next, we have Storm Grenade. This is nice because they got a nice 20% buff in PvE coming into the final shape. So it's going to be a little bit more potent than it was in the past as well. And so it gives us a light option along with a darkness option in Arcane Needle. For our aspects, you have Feed the Void. This is going to allow us to trigger Devour anytime we defeat a target with an ability, which is going to give us improved health regen and grenade energy, allow us to get that grenade back really quickly, and just huge part of our survivability on this build. And I think for a lot of Warlock builds, Feed the Void is going to be a hard one to take off. Next, we have Helion, I don't know. Activate your class ability to summon a solar mortar. Helps flaming projectiles at distant targets. Targets damaged by the mortar are scorched. So this allows us to kind of just ramp up those scorched stacks. Gives us an additional source of light damage as well. And because we're pairing this with Phoenix Dive, it's going to allow us to pop this as much as possible. Now let's get into our fragments. I do have all the fragments unlocked on my Warlock, starting with Facet of Balance. Rapidly defeating targets with light damage grants melee energy. Rapidly defeating targets with darkness damage grants grenade energy. And so this is great because when you throw Arcane Needle, it's going to be spreading that raveling to all the different targets, doing that darkness damage. And so this is another thing that helps us get our grenade back really quickly, along with Feed the Void, which is pretty awesome. And then also light damage deals grants melee energy. So that's where our damaging are from our storm grenades and other ways, which we'll be talking about, along with Helion, which is going to also all help give us our grenade and melee back, is going to help from all of this, right? So all the damage sources that we're mainly going to be using are going to be helping regen our melee and grenade, which is huge. So it creates like a nice circle of regen. Next, we have Facet of Hope. We have an elemental buff. Your class ability regenerates more quickly, and this is key. Elemental buffs, that includes things like Devour, Cure, which is what happens when you do your Phoenix Dive, along with being Radiant, Amplified. Any of those things are going to help with that cooldown, and so all of that is going to help make our Phoenix Dive come back even faster, which is nice because you don't necessarily have to run max recovery to get the most out of this ability. Next, collecting an elemental pickup or destroying a tangle grants Transcendence, energy of the same type. So this is nice to help get our Transcendence energy back quicker, because obviously that's a very potent part of the final shape. Next, we have Facet of Dominance. Your Void Grenades weaken targets and your Arc Grenades jolt targets. So this is great because, like we kind of talked about, light damage grants melee energy. Having that jolt is going to just add an additional debuff or additional damage dealing debuff to our targets from Storm Grenade. And the weaken comes into effect with Freezing Singularity. They'll throw a massive void energy and stasis matter. On impact, deploys a miniature black hole, and so on and so forth. So when we do pop Transcendence, this is going to allow us to get that weaken effect going. So it's not just because we have Storm Grenade, but we'll also get use of the weakening from Freezing Singularity as well. And so this to me is a mainstay in this build as well. Lastly, we have Facet of Protection. I found this just super helpful for overall survivability, especially when I was in minus 25 content that I was trying this out in. So this just helps while you're surrounded to have that Facet Protection, and gives us plus 10 strength, which is nice. And so all of this creates like a really nice synergy of getting your Arcane Needle and grenade back, as well as also getting a really quick cooldown on your Phoenix dive, because a lot of times you're proccing Devour and doing light damage from Helion. So all this I feel ties together really nice to create nice cooldowns and have a ton of debuffs going. You have people unraveled, you have people jolted while you're in Devour, as well as scorching them as well with Helion. So let's talk about a couple other things here as well in terms of the exotic that I recommend really running with this build, and that's going to be Matadoxia. Matadoxia is huge because targets damaged by Arcane Needle emit a suspending detonation when defeated, and landing multiple Arcane Needles on the same target immediately triggers a larger, more powerful detonation. So this is nice because defeating suspended targets grants melee energy as well. So when these targets do get suspended, you also get additional source of melee energy from Arcane Needle. The cool thing about this is when you hit some of these yellow bar bosses with Arcane Needle, if you hit them with 3 in a row, it automatically suspends them and creates a suspending burst. And so that is really great, is another way to suspend some of these chunkier bosses that do a lot of damage, which you will see in a lot of the footage. And so this is really nice, and obviously you have makes your Arcane Needle strong against anti-barrier champions, which is a nice effect. So this adds an additional way for us to suspend targets, as well as gain additional melee energy back, which is awesome. For our weapons, the weapons I'm running here, I'm running with this no other than Final Warning. I don't have the catalyst yet, but this thing is absolutely just destroys everything. Allows you to hold down the trigger to mark your targets with range and loads multiple bullets, fires a burst, and does basically a ton of damage. The cool thing is when you do the all at once with a full target, with a full charge, it also adds those unraveling rounds. So it's another way to get those enemies unraveling, and doing additional damage adds another debuff. And then I pair this with Indebted Kindness, so double sidearm here, which is nice because Indebted Kindness is pretty strong. But honestly, in this build, I didn't really have to use these at all, as you'll see in the gameplay. I sometimes will use Commemoration. You can use Commemoration on some of those bulkier enemies just to burn them down even quicker, or another light machine gun in terms of like being Void, Solar, or Arc is what I would recommend here. And then so that would wrap up our main weapons, but the main feature of this is Final Warning. I feel like it just pairs really well. And then before we get into our overall armor mods, I do want to talk about some of the main mods I'm running from our artifact. And the main ones I'm running here that I think are most important are Threaded Blast. So destroy a tangle with a strand weapon creates a larger and more damaging explosion. And so as you're killing these enemies that are unraveling, sometimes they will spawn a tangle, and it's very easy with your Final Warning then to shoot that tangle, and it's going to just have this huge detonating blast that does a ton of damage. So I really recommend it for this build. And then Radiant Orbs, we have a Solar or Prismatic subclass equipped. Pick up an Orb of Power, makes you Radiant, which is great, gives us that additional damage buff to our weapons, as well as further triggers Facet of Hope, which again is going to further reduce our class ability energy. So there'll be times where you're Radiant, you have Devour going, and all these going at once, and it's just really doing a great job of reducing your class ability regen. So I really recommend that as well. And then on this last, and then I'm also running Galvanic Armor. The reason I'm mentioning Galvanic Armor is because this is incredibly strong when it comes to reducing your incoming damage. So what I would say on this build is if you're finding yourself dying a lot and you can get Galvanic Armor, you could easily just switch your super to Storm Trance and switch the Facet of Honor to Facet of Purpose. And then what that means is any orbs of power you pick up while you have Storm Trance on will make you amplified, and then that will allow you to activate Galvanized Armor. I would only recommend this, or Galvanic Armor, my apologies. I would only recommend that if you're really struggling staying alive. Personally, between Devour, my Phoenix Dive, I didn't really have a lot of trouble staying alive. I ran the same encounter -25 that was very ad dense and had 2 strong yellow bar enemies multiple times to really test this build out, and I had no problem staying alive. I even tried it with a Storm Trance build, because the downside of that is the super is much weaker in my opinion when it comes to doing damage against enemies and bosses. So I would still recommend Song of Flame overall. For our mods, we'll just start at the top. I'm running Double Strand Siphon for my Final Warning, just give me those orbs of power a little bit quicker. For my gloves, I'm running Font of Vigor. Focusing Strike grants class ability energy when you cause damage or power melee attack, which is nice. And then I just throw whatever here, but these are the main things I'm running here. Just get my melee back as much as possible. Because of Devour, I get my grenade back really quickly already. And then here, I would just use all the damage resistance mods right here on your chest piece per usual. And then now you can, you know, make your exotics artifice armor, which is nice to help round out your stats. And then on our boots, I'm running Invigoration, reduce melee cooldown each time you pick up an orb of power, reduce all ability cooldowns with Absolution, and then Innervation, reduce grenade cooldown. So just something when I'm picking up orbs of power, all this combined is reducing my ability regeneration as much as possible, which just helps keep that uptime high. And then lastly here, we have Bomber, reduce grenade cooldown when using your class ability, and Outreach, reduce melee cooldown when using your class ability. All pretty common here, along with Reaper, because we're gonna be popping that Phoenix Dive a lot. This is gonna give us just another way to continue to generate those orbs of power, which is really, really nice. And so overall, I'm really enjoying this build. I love getting tons of debuffs on these enemies. It allows you to just dish out a ton of damage, on top of throwing in Final Warning, on top of being able to suspend enemies very easily with Matadoxia. And so talking about what is the loop in terms of how you use this build the most effectively, you really want to start off by popping your Phoenix Dive as early as possible. I do a somewhat good job of this in the footage, but basically you want to do that so you always have healing up. Once you pop that, then you really want to lead with an Arcane Needle and immediately follow that up with a Storm Grenade. Ideally, what that'll do is get people unraveling, or the combatants unraveling. Then you'll get a follow-up kill with the Storm Grenade. That'll trigger Devour. And then when you kill anyone who's been embedded with Arcane Needle, they will all then suspend all the enemies around them. And then you can start killing those suspended enemies. That's going to give you melee energy, as well as all this is going to also be feeding into grenade and melee energy, depending on light and dark damage that you're doing. And so all this creates like a really fun, really nice loop where you're getting tons of ability energy back just by kind of stringing some of these abilities together. And then if you get in a really tough spot, you can pop Transcendence, throw down your Void Grenade, and then you're gonna have 3 Arcane Needle hits immediately. And on these yellow bar enemies, you can throw 3 of them back to back, and that will immediately suspend them because of Matadoxia. And then you can kind of go from there to keep doing damage, keep popping your Phoenix Dive, because you're gonna be getting that back very quickly to keep healing up. And there's just so many different sources of damage and debuffs that you're getting, as well as your own buffs that are reducing your class ability. So I really enjoyed this build. I found the survivability was very high, as well as the overall damage output. And again, worst case scenario, after Transcendence, you also can pop Song of Flame to just completely kill everything, keeping in mind that the Devour will be triggered in Song of Flame as well. And so you just really can't die in that super, in my opinion, especially when there's adds involved and you're triggering Devour. So let me know what you guys think of this build. I had a lot of fun with it. I'd love to hear down below if there's any ways you would improve it. Obviously with Prismatic, there's a lot to take in, a lot of different combinations you can get into. And this is all before even having the exotic class items. So more to come there. Let me know what you think down below.